So welcome back, everybody, to yet another energizing episode of the Energize with Bram podcast. We're living today in a world of AI, machine learning, all this fancy automation stuff, artificial intelligence. And it's important that we also stay at the front line here with experts that know what they're talking about. Because people like me, we're the user of it all. I want to warmly welcome Jamie Sherrah to the podcast. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
Yeah, good, Bram. How are you? Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. And I've been looking forward to our chat here on the podcast. Look, very quick story. You obviously are a PhD in machine learning, right? How long have you been operating in the space?
Well, since the 90s, so about nearly 30 years.
So people like us that basically have only seen the ChatGPTs and the advent of Claude and all these other systems come up, you have been in the trenches for a very long time already. And so tell us briefly, like, what's the sort of work that you've been doing since you graduated with your PhD?
Gee, how long have you got?
Just in a nutshell.
Yes, I did a PhD in Adelaide in the engineering department on neural networks and genetic algorithms, and then did a postdoc in London on computer vision. And then we were doing a lot of detecting and tracking people in video. And at the time, it was a hot topic to have video surveillance and anti-terrorism and things like that. And then I went on to work in a startup in the same area where we made commercial grade software to do all this in real time with C++. And we had to write all the code ourselves. You couldn't just download it in the early 2000s.
Yep.
I've had a number of technical jobs like that, been in startups, worked for defense research, worked for a hedge fund, those kinds of technical jobs. In recent years, found myself at the Australian Institute for Machine Learning, which is Adelaide, or Australia's biggest research group for AI and machine learning and computer vision, and was helping them with industry and defense projects, and then ended up starting my own company, Inject AI, where we can make custom AI and machine learning software, focusing more lately on creating machine learning models or improving them, creating data sets, training them, and working on all different topics. So it's been a really rewarding career working in machine learning because, as you would know with AI, you can apply it to anything. So my whole career, I've come into different industries and had to learn a fair bit about that industry to be able to apply it. So I've done quite a lot of stuff, even more recently in the medical health space.
That's an interesting one. Actually, that's a good way, a segue into the next question. So for, let's say, the layman, people that haven't got the PhD in your field, to really quickly get them an idea of what machine learning looks like, because there's different grades of AI, right? So how does machine learning fit in? What exactly does it mean?
Yeah, it's basically getting our computer to perform some cognitive task where there's some kind of judgment involved. So we all know computers are good at logic and hard rules. The price is more than this, then do that or something. And that's been the basis for programming. It took us from those days where we had rooms full of people doing calculations on paper to you just have a pocket calculator and things like that. And computers move data around and transform it. But then when you have something like, is this a picture of a cat or not? You can't make rules for that because cats can look different and they could be drawn cats and there's too many rules to write down. And our brains just do this stuff naturally. We learn things. So it's those sort of cognitive tasks where it's more statistical and based on data. And you're presenting examples to the computer and getting the computer to learn by example how to perform a task. And something that really in machine learning is where we're at these days, or always have been, is that you have a data set and you train a model, you create a model, and then that model's kind of fixed. It's not, I think people have an idea that AI is like always learning or something, but we don't have reliable algorithms like that. They tend to forget when you keep learning online, they forget. So with ChatGPT and things like that, you get the illusion of learning because the tooling around the machine learning model is storing and remembering and databasing bits of information that it feeds back into it as well.
Yeah.
So it's like the AI is like an engine and then you have the framework around it to make an application.
I'm catching while we're having this conversation that it can very easily get very techy for the non-tech people. And so I think it's sometimes good to go back to things that we've all seen. And if you go online or you go on television, think of Netflix, you scroll through the directory and suddenly you see like a series like Person of Interest coming up, right? I recently started watching it. It was pretty grabbing. And the whole idea was that there's this big machine, an AI, that scans through tens of thousands of cameras, the whole city, probably what is already happening anyway. But the idea is that the machine, as they call it, they dub it as the machine, is that the machine not only can detect threat attacks like you just mentioned earlier for terrorist attacks, but it also has a specific list where certain names and even social security numbers land on of people that might be at risk of a criminal plot. And so those people could then be potentially rescued for one of the heroes in the series. Now, I think it's a good starting point because it gives us all a visual of a practical application of AI. We don't have the time or bandwidth for people for 24/7 to watch all those cameras, but an AI can do it, right? If we use that as an example, where do you see and have you already worked on particular projects where the AI, a model is basically introduced to then have a practical either community or commercial implication?
Oh yeah, pretty much my whole career. Yeah.
Walk us through.
Like at the Institute of Machine Learning, where I'm an adjunct member, they're very heavily focused on research and the criterion or your objective is to come up with some novel idea and research it. But my career has been more about deploying it. Sometimes you don't want the latest and greatest thing that came out last year at CVPR. You want something that's been around for a few years and is robust and well understood and has been matured by the research community over time, and maybe through some GitHub project or something. Oh, what are some examples? Let's see.
You mentioned medical, for example. What sort of thing have you?
So a recent one, we all know our hospitals are under pressure in South Australia with ramping. We're always looking, it's a complex problem, but we're looking at how can we help doctors or help the hospitals be more efficient. And one problem is in the emergency department, the doctors have to write these reports every time they see somebody. So that takes them time where they're not looking at and helping patients. They're sitting there typing. People forget things and details, things like that. But in private practice, people for a couple of years now have been using these scribes like Heidi Health, Lyrebird, where the doctor will whip out a mobile phone and there's an app running and it listens to the consult and then transcribes that automatically and turns it into notes or a letter to a referral letter or something like that. SA Health and the hospital system, they don't want to use something like that because all your data is going out into outside of their boundary. They have very strict data security requirements and they need to keep everything in their boundary. So they've been trialing that in emergency departments here, and we've been helping with deploying that in their secure environment, which we've just had going just recently. Over the next 6 or 12 months, we'll be looking at more the medical aspect. Is it really helping doctors? Is it really saving them time? Is it accurate enough? How does it compare to the reports they would have written? If you're in private practice, you're some sort of specialist. You just make those decisions subjectively. It's helping me or it's not, and I'll use it or I won't. But in hospitals, obviously, there's more of a framework and a process. And a new doctor might just get told you have to use this. So this hospital has to be sure that it's right and that the data's secure.
I'm glad that you touched on it because I know that you're big on data security. Case in point is that you are the founder also of a solution called Hippo, even though it's for the time being a bit on the back burner for you. But I know that the security is really important. I think the challenge from previous conversations that you and I have had was that whatever data enters into a software that was created overseas, case in point, US or anywhere else, the servers are overseas and therefore you don't really control the data for that reason. Is that basically full crux of it?
We have this Privacy Act in Australia that has things to say about how you can store and use data as a company. And it kicks in when you have a certain revenue level for a general company, but for medical or NDIS related businesses, it doesn't matter how big they are, they have to follow that. And obviously, the more critical and sensitive your data, the more important these things are and the more susceptible you are to litigation if something goes wrong. If you're a lawyer or a financial advisor or in any medical practice, then the security of the data is really important. A lot of the AI tools now, they come from overseas, mostly the US. People are really excited to use them, but not thinking about what's happening to the data. It's the same as any software system, right? If you use Grammarly, where is that going? It's looking at all your documents and where is that data going? Does it get stored? Does it get used? But the Privacy Act says that you should, if you're sharing data with a third party overseas, you should make sure it's got the same kind of security and legal comebacks as in Australia. And obviously, we can't control that. An example is Sam Altman said, if you've got anything really sensitive, don't put it in ChatGPT because we can't stop the US authorities coming and accessing that. It might, if people weigh up the risk reward here. You're an SME, probably it won't be relevant, that kind of example. But I think people aren't really thinking about this because it's not, nobody's really hurting from it at the moment. There's no huge court cases over breaches. There's no big breaches like we had here with Optus and Medibank. And even those, they came and went, and who's talking about them now? So it seems to be the nature of data security that it's a problem when something goes really wrong and then people forget about it a bit. But there are some extra risks with AI. One is that the data could be used to train a model and then indirectly be publicly disclosed in some form. And then the other is now more and more we're using agents. You've got like Claude Cowork and Claude Code and that are really popular. And the AI is going off and grabbing data and recombining it and putting it here and there and interfacing to different systems. And there's just more and more risk that the data goes the wrong way. A lot of the tools like Copilot and ChatGPT and such have had integrations with email for a while, and people say, I'll get it to send emails for me automatically. And there's a thing called prompt injection attacks, which is unique to AI, which is to say you can bypass the safeguards in something like ChatGPT and get the AI to act in a rogue way. So a hacker could just email you, if you had that integration, with the right email content and get all your private data emailed back to them. And that's been demonstrated with tools like ChatGPT and Copilot, and they keep putting out, oh yeah, we fixed this and that problem. But it's a problem you will never get rid of. So the jailbreaking, it's called jailbreaking. So you're getting the LLM to bypass the safeguards. It's like you can keep making it less and less susceptible to it, but I don't see how you can ever stop it.
And I think that the challenge is that the more open doors you give it, the more access you grant it to other systems, the more you're vulnerable to all these threats, right?
Yeah. I think we're seeing more and more that the power of AI comes from, or language models, large language models, is when you give it access to more data. We started out with ChatGPT in a window and you had to cut and paste everything and upload everything. And it's just slow and cumbersome. You're doing a lot of repeat work like that. And there's a shift more and more towards making all your data available. Probably the winners in that space would be Microsoft with the Copilot, where you're in their ecosystem, they can control where your stuff's stored, and then Copilot has access to all that. So I think that's all going pretty well, but I don't use it, so I'm not sure.
Let me ask you, like, how can businesses, we're talking really like the for-profit sector, mainly, I would say, but businesses, companies, how can they really use some best practices while they use the benefits that AI have on offer, but actually also make sure that they cover their own butt and they look after their customers better? What would be some best practices, tips that you can give them?
Yeah, on the data security side, I think one is just make sure whatever AI tools you're using, you've got the option switched off to train on your data. So I've noticed this has cropped up lately. There's a Copilot in GitHub. So GitHub is where a lot of people store their source code. And it's popped up recently saying we're going to start defaulting to training on your code, on your private repository code, unless you switch it off. So if you don't read that message or you don't act on it, then suddenly all your proprietary code is getting used to train their models, which is a big, huge problem. Because a software company's IP is the code, right? You could say, oh, I've got this invention or algorithm, but it's the code, and that you're disclosing it. I don't know how that goes for patents.
So that's a really practical one. What about like things like servers? Would you be a proponent to encourage companies to have their own servers stored, for example, onshore?
AI systems are IT systems, so you'd have to look at your cybersecurity practices and policies, look at it in the same context as that. So doing a risk assessment and everything like that. People seem pretty happy with cloud systems as opposed to on-prem. If you're really zero trust, you can go on-prem. So that means that you're running the AI on a computer at your premises. So for example, with the hospital scribe that we've made, that is an on-premises system. There's a GPU server that's running the large language model and other systems, machine learning systems. That would be the extreme level. But the problem is if you're using open source models, they're not as capable as the ones that you get in the cloud, like ChatGPT and Claude. But it depends on your application. So with all this, you really need to look at the requirements of what you need. Then you can have like private cloud. So like our Hippo product was like that. So you can have Azure or AWS or something like that. Within that cloud system, you can have a model, and you can even have models that are guaranteed to be served in where the processing happens within Australia. You make sure all the data gets stored in Australia, because if you use ChatGPT, you got on the left, you got all your past conversations. So all that data is stored on their servers in the US, right? So there's options to have that stored in the cloud, but in Australia. So there's lots of different options. You could look at that as maybe we do use US systems for the machine learning, but it's stateless. It's not storing anything. And then we make sure that the storage is here. So there's different options, and you have to look at the requirements. But if you go on premises, the costs of the hardware can be significant depending on the power of the model you're using. With agents and stuff, it is talking about helping businesses, best practices. If you think of in software, you got this concept of read write. Sometimes you're just reading, you're not changing anything. And sometimes you're writing. So that would be putting documents on your Google Drive or sending an email or something. Seems straightforward that if you're reading, that's safe. You're not disclosing anything. But if you're writing, then that's when data could leak out of your organization. So I would say go ahead with integrations that read data from outside, but just be careful and review where you're enabling an integration that can write to some system and data's going out the door that way. Another recommendation that's practical for businesses is splitting the use cases into sensitive and non-sensitive. So you could imagine a company has an internal system that you just use for really secure data, board meeting work or something like that. But if you're writing an article for blog or LinkedIn or something that's going to go public, then just use whatever tool you want.
SaaS apocalypse. A
couple of months ago, the stock market got hit hard with software companies, their share prices going down, which they called the SaaS apocalypse. And this came about around that time. Claude Cowork was coming out and OpenClaw. And what they say in particular, this was triggered by Claude releasing these skills or recipes. One of them was for reviewing contracts, legal contracts. And there's been machine learning or AI legal software around for decades before large language models and generative AI. People just think we don't need those tools now because we've got Claude, and Claude can review contracts. So we don't need that specialized piece of software, specialized SaaS software as a service application on the web. We don't need that anymore. We just get Claude to do it or ChatGPT. And the stock market the price is have the future predicted earnings built into them. So people were saying, okay, these software packages might still be valuable, but they're not going to get as much recurring revenue in the future as we expected. So then they downgrade the price estimate, even though they might be good businesses.
There's another point that you mentioned that would be worth us talking about. What about the missing AI knowledge or data layers? Specifically for organizations out there, what do they have to be thinking about? What is important? Because I think we all very easily dabble into all this stuff. We fall into it. We start using ChatGPT. We start using Claude, what we're using, Copilot, whatever. But we're not really mindful of how to build it properly, how to structure it well, and how to be smart with it so that we do things right.
Yeah, that's where the dust has not settled. We're still in early days or pioneering days of AI. When I was at uni, the internet was invented, and I was using browsers like Netscape and Mosaic that don't exist anymore, and Yahoo search engine that I think it might still be there, but no one uses that. And yeah, there were others, and they're not around anymore. I've always thought, you look at OpenAI and everybody thinks they're cool and ChatGPT is cool, but who knows? In 10 years, they might not exist. Google can play the long game because they're massive and they've got this income stream from advertising, and they're doing quite well with Gemini anyway. So who knows in 10 years how it will look in terms of AI. But again, there's that issue of it's powerful when you bring the data to it, and that's where it's not clear what will happen. Because the problem is if you're trying to integrate with everything, then it's difficult, but maybe AI can help with that as well. As I said, I think what will happen is for business, eventually it'll settle on a handful of solutions that people use, and Copilot is looking like one because you've got that Microsoft ecosystem, and for knowledge workers, that's just like such a common solution. Google's got their suite as well, and their ecosystem that they can, and they're deploying Gemini into, and that it's all integrated.
What about things like Salesforce? Because obviously they're in the cloud. They're very little on their, what is it, their Genie application or whatever it's called, or Genius? Or...
Yeah, this comes back to the SaaS apocalypse. There's different kinds of software. The operating system running our computers right now, that has to be very carefully made. You can't vibe code that. If you've got something that's doing payroll for your employees, it's got to be really carefully checked. You know, as a company, you don't want to go, I'll just vibe code 0 and have it do my accounts for me. If there's any mistakes or lack of robustness in that, or it deletes all your data, it's a huge problem. And so you wouldn't vibe code the software that runs airliner and aircraft. So there's different kinds of software, and those tried and true apps need careful development. A lot of people, when they talk about using AI to generate apps quickly, it's about kind of internal apps that maybe have a limited lifespan, need to evolve quickly. They can be rough around the edges. They don't need to look good and stuff like that. Don't need to handle every case.
You're looking like an application like Lovable or something?
Yeah, I've only used Lovable for websites. Does it do apps as well?
My understanding is that it would. If you want a CRM system, it could build you one.
Yeah, and there's like Superbase and platforms like that do those kind of things. Because, deploying it in the cloud is one of you can vibe code it on your laptop and then you get to deploy it. So those platforms allow it to be deployed easily, which is really important. But yeah, getting back to the SaaS apocalypse and companies like Xero and Salesforce, they're like programs of record, or it's where your data lives. And if they then go, oh, let's add AI to our platform, it's probably going to end up mediocre, and it's not going to keep up with the other companies. That's all they do, like OpenAI and Anthropic. So I think a better strategy for them is to say, yeah, we're like a data company and we've got some domain-specific tooling and maybe some domain-specific AI, but we're just going to make sure that the integrations and the APIs and interfaces are there, that it can interface with the latest and greatest AI tools. So if your SaaS company just does some data processing, then you're in trouble in terms of being superseded by something like Claude. But if you're storing data and there's a lot of domain specific processing and knowledge that goes into how you handle that, the calculations and processing that's going on, then that's like a moat and good value. So maybe the future is going to be you have all these data-centric services, you have some domain-specific services, and they're all openly integrating with AI, and then somehow we come up with a way of doing that securely. The internet is just going to get more and more complex, and it already is too complex. And we jump on a browser and use it like a library searching for things. And we're not really benefiting from everything we can because we can only search for a few things that we thought of. And I think what should have or what we will have is like a broker to the internet. We've got an AI agent that's our broker to the internet. And it's finding stuff for us proactively, giving it to us, and it's interacting with other AI agents or brokers to find what we want. And maybe at that level, those agents can disclose like the minimum amount of information that they need to maintain privacy.
Hey, I've got one more question for you, briefly. Obviously, AI, a lot of people say, hey, look, this is really making a lot of jobs redundant and replacing people and more robots, more machines. Aside from that, I'm just wondering, in this whole debacle of machines versus humans, how do you see the future of people's skills and the need for them the more that we get AI being part of our daily life?
Yeah. They say that some small fraction of human communication is verbal, right? It's body language and expression and all those nuances. And we're far from AI replacing all that stuff. I guess you can have avatars that can do stuff, but still being in person with someone is important.
I'm coming actually from the angle of employability for somebody to have a good opportunity in the job market, even though their technical skills might be replaced by agents here and there more and more. How would people's skills potentially help them to maintain, if not secure, further employment?
I guess the default answer is just make sure you're really good at using AI and keep up with it. So here's that argument that AI won't replace your job. Someone who uses AI will replace your job. So obviously some jobs are just going to outright be replaced, as with any disruptive industry cycle. And people are going to just be more productive and get more done with AI. Maybe in some ways work will get more stressful because you won't have those downtimes of doing the boring, repetitive work that might have just been a rest for your brain. That guy's just handing you all the hard cases. But yeah, I think if you're orchestrating, overseeing, let's look at software, for example. The way I work has changed a lot. I use code and stuff that wasn't feasible before I can do now in much quicker time. I don't know how it's going to go for junior developers because to me, Claude Code is like a junior or better developer where you get the answer in minutes, not days. So, and it's not having to go and learn about stuff. It just knows it. So in terms of efficiency and cost, it's really good, but it's not good enough to be autonomous yet. You need an experienced software engineer to guide it, to check it, to correct it. It'll just do silly design things, make silly mistakes, make wrong assumptions, and you need someone overarching. And I think it'll be the same in every industry with language models. Say you're doing marketing, somebody needs to quality control it, check it, make sure that what it's producing is on message with the company and not breaching any guidelines and things like that. But it doesn't mean you have to actually be right typing the words, doing research.
I like the analogy that I heard somebody say, and I thought that was the best way to look at it. He says, you got to see yourself as the expert being the architect, but then you actually have the builders, the doers, the implementers that do 80% of the grind work, which is the AI. You got to be the architect, the designer, and overseeing it, coordinate it, but have the doing done by AI. So I thought that was really a good way, the 80-20% rule sort of thing.
Yeah, will it change over time? On their own, the AIs don't have motives and goals, right? Ultimately, it's us telling it what to do or making those decisions. The other thing is accountability. For example, you could say that all lawyers are just working with documents and information, so you could replace all that with AI, but an AI is not a legal entity. So someone's going to be accountable legally for the decisions and information and all that stuff. At the very least, you need a lawyer to be overseeing what the AI is doing, but then there's also all that high level judgment, decision making, combining information. I think humans are still better at that subjective and decision making and information fusion than the computers are.
Our time is up for today, Jamie, but it's such a vast topic to unpack. I have to say, you've been very eloquent in explaining yourself and giving us a little bit of an understanding of what this very highly complex matter represents for us all, both in pros and cons. Really appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. And obviously, should anyone ever want to talk to you, you're on LinkedIn, they can reach out to you. You got your website, so we'll make sure that people have access to those. So otherwise, any last final thought or comment, just briefly?
Just make sure that you're using AI so that you can keep up, because it's changing very quickly, and yeah, it's hard for anyone to keep up.
This was the end of our Energize with Bram podcast. We look forward to seeing you again next time. For now, goodbye.